Captain America Super Soldier was released in July of 2011 for the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3. It is developed by Next Level Games and published by Sega. Now I know what you're all thinking, oh boy, another movie-based superhero game, but let me catch your attention here. The combat in Captain America Super Soldier is actually based off of the Batman Arkham Asylum combat system, and, believe it or not, it's actually fun and it works really, really well. So let me start off by talking about the combat, because that is by far the most redeeming quality about this game, and then I'll get into the game's downfalls, which, believe it or not, there's quite a lot of them. First of all, the combat. As you can see from the gameplay videos here, it works just like Batman Arkham Asylum, meaning that it's, for the most part, a simple button masher, so there really are no button combinations to pull off any kind of combos. Combat is tied specifically to one button. For your normal string of attacks, there's also a button that you can use to dodge attacks, which will in turn fill up your blue meter on the bottom of the screen, which is used to pull off finishers, which I'll get to in a second. And then there's another button which you can use to pull off enemy shields, or basically deflect their attacks and make a counter attack. And then you also have your trigger button, which can be used to aim and throw your shield. It may sound quite simple, but when you're in a pretty big battle with a lot of enemies, you gotta be able to deflect enemy bullets from ranged attackers, you have to be able to deal with enemies with shields, and of course the big, more advanced enemies with their blast weapons and such. It can get pretty complex. However, it really would have been nice to see a few more different enemy types throughout the game, because throughout the campaign I only saw maybe a handful, 5 to 7 different enemy types maximum, and after a while it got to be a pain seeing and fighting the same enemies over and over again. With that being said, however, combat never got old for me. Even all the way to the end of the game when I finished it, I was still craving being able to take my shield and bash it into the enemy's skulls. As minor as it may sound, it really was satisfying to hear the clings and the clanks of the shield just hitting into the enemies, and it really has an impact. It feels like you're really giving it to the enemies, and that really kept me going throughout the entire game, as well as the finishers, which never got old. It's just, you know, it's simple, slow down camera, shows you finishing off the enemy, but damn if they look cool every single time. Now it's time to get into some of the aspects of Captain America Super Soldier that really hold it back from being a great superhero action-adventure game that it could have been. Let's start with the upgrade system, which is very poorly implemented. At the start of the game, you have 3 different options to choose from. One of them basically upgrades your shield, one of them upgrades your ability to counter enemies, and one of them gives you a new ability. But the problem with this is the upgrades come so few and far between. You get experience from killing enemies and doing combos and finding collectibles throughout the game, but the upgrades come so slowly, and at times they don't feel impactful enough on, advancing the character. You do unlock abilities such as a shield bash and an area of effect stun attack, but that's really all there is to speak of. I mean, what's the fun in spending all of your experience on being able to throw your shield and hit one additional enemy? In my opinion, most of these abilities should have been on the character at the very beginning of the game to really open up combat right from the beginning, because by the time you reach the end of the campaign mode, which takes roughly 5 hours to complete, you're, unlocking abilities that you should have had hours ago, whereas now you're getting them and the game is almost over. Speaking of collectibles, if you are into gathering and finding hidden items and not so hidden items obviously placed throughout the levels, Captain America Super Soldier is not going to disappoint. This game is littered, and I mean littered, with collectibles to find. It does unlock artwork and such through the game's extras options, but there's just so many of them. I'm telling you, every turn and corner that you take in this game, you're going to see little collectibles to pick up and find. But after a while, it just got to be so monotonous. There are just too many, and they're too obviously out in the open, and after a while, I just started to ignore them, as it was just not worth my time to go and explore these levels, which, by the way, the level designs are quite boring. There's really not too much to look at. Besides the portions of the game where you go outside, which can look quite impressive at times, the level designs are just very boring to look at times and kind of uninspired. The game also tries to trick you into thinking that it's an open world game, which in a way it is, because when you open up the world map, all the areas in the game are interconnected, and you can backtrack if you wish to collect old collectibles that you might have missed, but enemies don't respawn, so there's little point to it. The problem with this is the game plays in a linear fashion, so it's constantly pushing you from one area to the next, and I found it kind of surprising that by the end of the game, and we're talking within the last hour of gameplay, it opens up a sewer system which lets you travel to old areas of the game fast and easy, monotony, but what's the point of that when you're about to beat the game? Honestly, I felt it to be pretty pointless. To break up the monotony of running through the levels when you're not in combat, they also incorporate jumping segments where you jump from bars and ledges, and really these segments look cool in the video, but they're not a lot of fun to perform. It encourages accurate button presses in, quick and accurate timing jumps, but there's really no penalty to missing the timing of your jumps, and all it really boils down to is mashing on the A button as you tilt the joystick in the direction you're supposed to be going. There's also 2 different door opening puzzle mechanics that repeat throughout the game a lot, and it gets to be very tedious after a while, and they really don't do much to break up the gameplay. If anything, they're just quick little distractions. To help you get through the game though and not get stuck in terms of finding switches and ledges to jump on and such, there is a vision mode in the game very similar to what's also found in Batman Arkham Asylum, which will highlight key points throughout the game world, including ledges, collectibles, and anywhere in the game world that you're supposed to go, including checkpoints. You may think this would take fun out of exploring the game, but it actually helps speed it up really well, and let me tell you, I was happy it was in the game, because there were times where I had no idea where I was supposed to be going, and activating this vision mode really helped me carry through the game at a nice pace. Despite all of the game's downfalls, I would still recommend it if you're a fan of Batman Arkham Asylum, superhero games, or action games in general. It's going to be up to you whether or not it's worth the full price of admission, but I can safely say that the combat in this game was really a treat, and it was a lot of fun. It played just as good as Batman Arkham Asylum, and that's saying quite a lot. So if you can look past this game's downfalls, you'll find quite a fun combat system, and it might be one worth checking out. Anyway guys, thanks for watching.
That's better. Felt naked without this.